Well, howdy friends, Brian Flechsig of Mad River Outfitters and the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools, and welcome back to another episode in our Q&A series. You know, we appreciate your questions. We say it all the time. We get tons and tons of questions. That's kind of what we're here for. So remember to send those questions over to admin@madriveroutfitters.com. If we choose your question to be featured here on the YouTube channel, we're going to send you a free hat and a fly box. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. That really helps us out. Hit the like button. Hop on over to madriveroutfitters.com and geez, buy something. We need your support in order to continue making these videos. So anyhow, all right, let's get to the point. Finally, question comes to us from Andrew Mason from Dallas, Texas. And Andrew, thank you for being here. But Andrew says, thanks for your recent video explaining poly leaders. Andrew, you're welcome. And if you haven't seen that video, there's a link right here. And if you can't see that link on your device, there's a link down in the description, as there always is. We've talked quite a bit about poly leaders recently, and I've been doing a lot of wet fly fishing, swinging wets, soft tackles, and I do enjoy fishing with poly leaders, and it's a big part of the system. I also do fish a lot of dry flies, larger dry flies, using the poly leader, floating poly leader butt sections. But anyway, Andrew writes that I was always intrigued but never really understood their proper use. And you know, that's good to hear, and we've heard that from a lot of folks. I mean, a lot of folks were under the impressions that they were sinking tips. And in fact, a lot of places sell them as sinking tips, and they're not really sinking tips. They don't replace sinking tip fly lines or sinking lines. They're sinking leaders. They're sinking butt sections. Of course, they make a floating butt section as well. But Andrew goes on to say that your explanation of the connector piece out front and then how to properly construct a tippet from there was extremely helpful. Well, glad to hear. And yes, it is wildly important to know what that monofilament, there's a monofilament connector that comes out. And let me pull this out so you can see it again. There's a monofilament connector piece, and it's about yay long. And that's the monofilament core of this butt section. And the polyurethane is attached around that monofilament core. So it's very important to remember what that monofilament core is so that you're attaching the right piece or pieces to make your tippet, because you can't ever attach something thicker than the diameter of this. So you can go to that video, and it's also listed on our website. If you look at these on our website, we tell you what that connector is, and then that video will help you determine how you make a tippet, or what might be called a compound tippet, where you have a transition piece then to the tippet so you don't create a hinge. But Andrew, I'm glad that that was helpful. We've heard that from a lot of folks. That's cool. But my question is, though, can you use a tippet ring in place of the perfection loop to attach the tippet? In the video, you showed to tie a perfection loop in the connector as well as the tippet, or transition then tippet. So yes, and Andrew, my apologies. Yes, you can absolutely use a tippet ring, especially on the sinking poly leaders, on the intermediate or the sinking versions. You can absolutely tie a tippet ring. And I apologize. I thought I said that. I tried to blame it on editing, and Dev said, no, man, I wouldn't edit something like that out. And so my apologies to you, to everyone that watched that video, and especially to our wonderful editor, Dev Fogle, whom I really do like. But yeah, you can use a tippet ring, not a problem. You just, and that really is easy. I'm old-fashioned. I was tying perfection loops in those. That's just how I learned to do it. I started using these mostly for the floating version. I was throwing grasshoppers and stuff out in Montana with the poly leader. We just did a video on my day off in Montana, and I showed using the poly leader. I don't love using tippet rings on dry fly leaders. And that's just me. In fact, I think Kelly Gallup and I had this discussion recently when I was out at the Slide Inn, and Kelly said, "Oh, come on. It's a tippet ring is not going to sink a dry fly. It's not going to sink a hopper." He's right. There's no question. Like I said, I'm just kind of set in my ways. I've always tied a perfection loop in that connector and gone perfection loop to attach my tippets. So you can do it that way, but I will admit that tying a tippet ring on, and I would most often use the 2 millimeter, although you could probably use the 1 millimeter version of the tippet rings if you wanted to for less profile, and especially on the floating poly leaders. And it does make it super, super easy. That way you're never cutting back. I'll admit it can be sometimes after you've been fishing a full day, those perfection loops can get a little tight and tough to undo. And I wind up usually cutting this one, and then it is a little bit of a struggle. So not only can you use the tippet rings, in all fairness and all honesty, it's probably easier, and you can use them on the floating versions if you want. So absolutely, tippet rings, my bad. I apologize that I neglected to mention that in that video, which I thought I did, and I still think I did. Andrew goes on, "You have often talked about cutting your loops and nail knotting and snell knotting your leaders onto your fly line." Yes, I have, and of course we've talked about that a lot in the past with our dearly departed Mr. Flip Pallet. Flip did not like loops, as if you couldn't tell.
Loop, get rid of it.
Yet here you talked about looping poly leaders on. Can you explain why that would be? Yes, I can explain this. The first answer is that you just really can't nail knot or snell a poly leader. It's just too fat, and it does not grab onto the tip of your fly line like monofilament does. So first and foremost, you really can't do it. I mean, you can try, but you can't. And Andrew, you're not the only one. A bunch of people sent me emails and even called, and they said, "Hey, I already cut my loops off my fly line. Now you're saying you have to loop on a poly leader." I'm going to show you how to fix that here momentarily. So the first answer is that you can't snell or nail knot that poly leader onto the tip of your fly line. The second reason is, I've said this in a bunch of videos, if you're going to be changing leaders throughout the course of a day, or even over a week-long trip, if you're going to be changing leaders on a given fly line, then you're going to have to stick with loops. You don't want to be snelling or nail knotting a leader on every time you need to change a leader. When Flip and I taught you that we snell our butt section on, we snell that butt section on because we know exactly what we're doing. That's the only thing we're going to be doing, and that leader will never change. If I snell a butt section on, that butt section never, ever changes. Period. And we've got plenty of videos that go into depth on that. But if you're going to be changing leaders, and with this poly leader system, and the way that I use them for wet fly fishing, you're constantly changing them. I mean, I might walk 20 yards upstream and I'll look at that water. Maybe it's a little faster, maybe it's a little deeper, and I want to switch to the super fast sink. So I have to have that loop system to loop it on and off, put that back in, put on the proper density of poly leader that I think is appropriate for that water. They already have tippet sections attached to them. I tie the fly on, and it really in under 30 seconds, I swap out my butt section of my leader, and then I've got the appropriate depth. So you have to be changing leaders, so I must have a loop system. Not to mention, one of the main reasons why why we like to cut the loops is because it really helps me to get a tighter loop. And this is especially important when I'm sight casting. I'm sight casting to a carp, to a bonefish, a redfish, a tarpon. And that's important to me. With this style of casting with a poly leader, you're just slopping that thing out there. I mean, you don't want or need a tight loop. So having that loop-to-loop connection is not a big deal. When you're nymph fishing, having a loop-to-loop is not that big of a deal. It's only when the precision casting is at hand is when that's going to become important to me. So, and again, a lot of people like to accuse us of cutting the loops. Well, sure, I cut my loops and I snell on a butt section on a bonefish leader, a redfish leader, a bass leader, a pike muskie leader, because that's all I'm ever going to do with that line. And it helps my casting. It's not because it's stronger. It's not because there's an anti-loop coalition. It's just because it helps my presentation. It helps me to be more accurate. And it's not stronger. I don't think it is stronger, as a matter of fact. But I always have a weaker link out front, so who cares? Anyhow, enough of that preaching. Okay, if you did cut your loops, there is a way to fix that. Okay, and you're going to do the same thing that I did in the front of this. You're going to attach a piece of monofilament. So you've got your fly line, right? And you've cut the loop. And now you say, well, wait a minute, I'm going to buy some poly leaders. And now how am I going to attach them? I have to go to loop to loop. So you're going to make a loop to loop connector. And you're going to snell. Preferably, we like the snell version. It is the same thing as a nail knot. The end result is the same. It's that the snell seats a lot better than a nail knot does. That video is coming up. We're going to prove that once and for all. And for all the naysayers who have said, oh, it's just a nail knot. Well, yes, it's the same thing. It's a different method of tying that nail knot, and it seats a lot better and grabs the fly line better. That's why we use the snell. And that's why Flip taught us that. And then, so we're going to snell on a piece of monofilament that matches in stiffness to the fly line. Just the same thing we do when we're building a contact leader. Same exact thing. It's just that in this case, we're going to make it short and we're going to tie a perfection loop right there. So now, this works better if, cut your loop and then do this if you want loops, because it works better than the factory loop that was installed. We've done this before. In fact, it's a very, very popular video. You can find that video right here. It's called How to Fix Your Broken Loop, because that's something I have an office full of broken loops that people have brought in over the years. Your loop is going to fail. It's going to break. It's going to crack. It's inevitable. But if you're not just fixing your broken loop and you want to make your loop better, you can do this. Again, here's the video. If you can't see it right there, there's a link down in the description. It's called How to Fix Your Broken Loop. And I'll tell you what, we'll do it again moving forward. Coming at it from the perspective of cut your loop and do this because it works better anyways. But this piece right here must match your fly line in stiffness. That's the important part. That's the whole concept behind the leader formula that Flip taught us and shared with us, and that we've been sharing with you here for years and years. So, and if you ever have questions, we've shown you how to do the bell curve test. We'll probably do it again moving forward because it's never bad to repeat so that you can see it again. Do the bell curve test and find the monofilament. For example, an average 5-weight fly line, that's true to line weight, using Maxima Clear, that's what I most often use for this connector, is probably 17 thousandths. That gives you a guideline. If it's an aggressive 5-weight, if it's, say, two line weights heavy, if it's a 5-weight, and then it says 5-weight on the box, but it's actually a 7-weight grain-wise, which happens a lot, you might go up to 20 thousandths on the diameter on that butt section. But again, it's a stiff monofilament like Maxima Clear. So if you did cut your loop, which it sounds like you might have, Andrew, and if you didn't, there's a bunch of people that sent me emails and say, hey, what gives? I cut my loop and now you tell me to use loops. It's easy to fix, okay? And if watch that video, we'll do that video again, coming at it from this perspective of not to fix your broken loop, but get rid of your loop in the first place and do this. Because Lefty taught us many, many years ago that Lefty didn't like the loops in the fly line either. Where do you think Flip learned that? Where do you think, Chico and all of the folks that cut their loops and Snell their butt sections on? But Lefty didn't like those loops, and Lefty taught us that though loop to loop in monofilament is not necessarily a bad thing. So having now going to loop mono or loop to polyleader should work just fine, just like I did off the front of that connector to the Tippet piece. Again, it's just old school me. Back 20, 30 years ago, people weren't using Tippet rings, or heck, these days I use swivels on all. And for that matter, why not on these sinking leaders just put a swivel? A Tippet ring is fine, but put a swivel on the front there. That's perfect, and that's going to give you even more versatility, and it's going to help the sink rate slightly, help the sink rate of the polyleader, and it's not going to hurt anything. So let's take it one step further, and sure, you can use a Tippet ring. You can use the Tippet ring on the floating version, but what the heck, go to a swivel on the sinking versions. Might as well. So there you go, Andrew. Sorry if it seems like I'm preaching a little bit, but it's very important to me that you understand this stuff and that it makes sense. That's what we're here for. I've been lucky enough in my life to learn this, live this, and do it. And it is our goal here at Mad River Outfitters to share that with you. So if you have any questions about that, again, you pick up the phone and you give me a call here at the shop, or shoot me an email. Every email gets answered. I answer emails approximately 22 hours a day. It really seems like that, but and I'm happy to do it. So Andrew, thank you again. We appreciate you being here. Thanks for the great questions and allowing me to correct that wrong in the fact that apparently I did forget to mention Tippet rings, but now we've taken it one step further and go with a swivel on the sinking versions. No question. So Andrew, watch your mailbox for that hat in the fly box. We appreciate you. As always, friends, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That really helps us out. Hit the like button. That just makes us feel good. Hop on over to madriveroutfitters.com and register for our monthly newsletter. We've got a lot in store for late 2025 and into 2026, so you don't want to miss out on anything. And as always, friends, thanks for being here. Send those questions over via email or phone, and stay tuned. We have so much coming your way. It's hard to imagine.